Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. Well, I have been excited to do a little bit of ink resist and then try out a couple of techniques with rub-ons that are really easy to achieve, but just to give them some color as well. Now, this pack here is the Holiday Life collection of rub-ons from Simple Stories, and there are two, in my opinion, very different sort of designs. The front here is the sort of more bold red and green, very Christmassy, and then the back is the birds and the sprigs and the more line design. And then I have these two stencils. Now, I think a subscriber sent me this one on the left, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's sort of jumbled numbers. And the one on the right is the Tim Holtz Sparkle Fade stencil. I also have some transparent texture paste here. This one is the gloss. So actually I am going for the shiny look. That's fine. You could use matte gloss. You could use regular, transparent, opaque. Anything that you have is going to work. We're just going for that white resist look here. If you use a matte texture paste, it may take on some of the ink color, but that's just a different look. That's okay. This one here is very like, you know, semi-soft or semi-melted butter or mayonnaise or something like that. And so it is quite easy to spread on. Now, I want this card to be a landscape card, but it's just easier for me to put the texture on down the bottom, what will be down the bottom of the card in this direction. So I start off with the Sparkle Fade one from Tim Holtz, clean it off a little bit, put any excess back in the jar, and then be sure to either clean off your tools or pop them into a little dish of water so that you can get the texture paste off. And then once I did wait about 10 minutes, I wouldn't say the first layer was dry, but it was sort of touch dry. And then I'm just going to take little pieces and do a couple of numbers here and there over top of this other stencil, sort of where there's a little gap and things, because with the Sparkle Fade layering stencil from Tim Holtz, there are definite gaps that you can add in other bits and pieces. So I thought I'd take the opportunity and pop some numbers in there for no good reason. Of course, you could have everything or anything else would go in there from a stencil. I have some Wild Dandelion, Key Lime, and Ocean Mist inks. These happen to be from Gina. They are dye inks. I want the translucent nature of dye inks for this so that we can also get that really good resist of the texture paste that we already have on there. I've popped a little bit down on a non-porous surface, any piece of plastic, any packaging or an ice cream bottle lid or something like that, anything non-porous. I'm using an acrylic block, and then I just have my water spritzer, which I spritz my actual project, and then I will also spritz the actual inks up the top, and then I usually make a puddle somewhere on my desk as well, because this is a vinyl background, and so I'm able to pop water on it. It can be wiped up nice and easily. And then I just want a nice sort of fade between the three colors. Now, of course, depending on the occasion, you could change up these colors. These could be pinks and purples, oranges, yellows, blues, greens. You could do golds. You could do whatever you like. I am going for a little appreciation sort of card today, just to say how much I appreciate someone, so I know who this is going to. Now, bearing in mind that the Holiday Life collection, it's sort of a Christmassy, I would say, Christmassy set in my opinion, the rub-ons that I'm going to use. However, that's not how I'm using them today, and it's good to remember that these are actually versatile things, that just because one side has certain colors, that we absolutely do not have to use them for Christmas. Now, some of my inks were getting a little bit diluted, so don't be afraid to mop them up or wipe them up or get some new ink, put some new ink down. You could use re-inkers, you could use watercolors, you could use watercolor pencils. There are so many things that you could use here, so don't be limited to just having ink pads. I'm going to put that aside to dry whilst I work on my little focal point image, which is going to be a little bird. Now, I picked out some yellow, some of the Wild Dandelion, and a bit of warm cocoa, and these are just another couple of Gina K ink, so dye ink, so I mushed them down onto the block so that I'm able to use them like watercolors essentially. And I want to create some colors to go behind my little birdie, so I'm going for this bird here, and I want sort of, I'm just holding it beside so that I can somewhat see what I'm doing. I'm going to have, you know, basically there's no skill involved here, I promise you. It's just sort of brown on the top and yellow for a belly, and that's what I was aiming for. And then make sure that his little tail has some, you know, some brown that's able to be there as well. And so I'm just popping down the color, and, you know, not too specific, but I just want to add a little bit of color to this little gorgeous birdie. So I'll pop that color down first, make sure it's very nice and dry before I try and put a rub on it as well. Now, guys, I finally got a new heat gun. The pink one, which is the one I used to have, was the very first and only one I have ever owned. I did get one in and try and use it for with our New Zealand power outlets here, and I blew it up. So I only got a single use out of it. So when I was up in Auckland recently at Crafters Cart, I purchased one there. This is the turquoise one that you can see now. So I have a new one, and it is not held together by washi tape anymore. So it is very exciting to have a new one. That is a gorgeous little store if you're ever there. So pop in. And anyhow, I've popped the little birdie down, and it worked perfectly. I've got plenty of color down. You can see the color through. I've placed him so he's got some yellow on his little belly, and then the rest of him is pretty much brown. Of course, with the black and the details of the actual rub-on, it makes this little focal point look quite good here. So I was happy with how this one turned out. I am going to fussy cut out this little guy nice and easy. As you know, for me, I don't choose to fussy cut tricky images, so this little birdie was perfect for me. I've also picked out a couple of little pieces of branches and foliage, I guess, so that I can add those on as well. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to add them on, but you'll see in just a minute. I'll play around with a couple of different ideas. If I wanted to, I could have used my big brush marker pens to add some more color on top of these rub-ons, but I was happy enough with how that little birdie looked anyhow. So now we have our original piece that we worked on with the resist. You can see some of the resist coming through quite nicely actually, but I have forgotten to go over this with a little dry cloth to get rid of some of that ink that has sat and dried on top of the resist. It's not permanent there, you can wipe it away. I'll remember in a few minutes that I need to do that because it starts to get over my fingers. I can feel it coming off on my fingers. And so make sure that after you've done that, make sure that you just run a dry paper towel or something over top to collect that excess little bit of ink. And here is whether I'm figuring out how long I want these little branches to be. I have trimmed down my card front a little bit because I know I want there to be a nice little border. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to make like a little cluster, whether I wanted them all going in one direction, or whether I would have them sort of going, the little foliage pieces going in different directions, but nice to have a little play around as well. Eventually I decide this one is a little bit big, so I'm actually just going to trim off the bottom layers of each of that foliage, if you know what I mean. So I can just make it a little bit smaller, but I kept the main stem nice and long. So again, with the rub-ons, really easy to pop on. I just use my bone folder. It does come with a little popsicle stick that you can pop it on with, but really easy to pop them on. I actually pulled this up here and pulled up the little stem. So I just pop it back in place, pop it down, and then rub again, and there is no join line. There's nothing where you can see where you have joined these together. Now I will say this card sort of comes together all right at the very end. Now the next thing I will also tell you is I didn't love what happened with this card. So I actually don't have pictures of the final card because I did pull it apart after this video. Not pull it apart actually, just add to it because I stamped out the sentiment and I ended up just not liking it, but we'll come to that in a minute. So I have some, I think this is the Tranquil Teal. These Gina K colors go on quite dark, beautiful, but quite dark, and within about 30 or so seconds, they lighten up and they even out. They become very, it's almost fun to watch. You can almost watch it in real time as it sort of evens out really nicely. So don't be afraid when you first put down some of her ink colors that you think, that's not even and it's a little bit blotchy. They definitely come out nicer after 30 seconds to a minute. Now this stamp set, these leaves, I could not resist. These are called sketched leaves and I love them, but today I'm going to be using the sentiment because I really liked it. However, I think I put a little too much pressure and honestly it kind of got a little bit blurry. Not too bad, and at this point I thought I'm just going to keep going. but this is the part that I actually end up redoing, and that's okay. I have another couple of projects coming up with those leaves, and I absolutely love them. They are fun to play with, so you'll see that coming up soon. But in the meantime, I have got my little sentiment stamped, so I will just tell you now that actually I ended up putting like a little banner, a drop down banner over that sentiment. It just wasn't as clear and crisp, and I think I wanted something a little more delicate and scripty, so I did end up taking the card and just adjusting it a little bit after this. Sorry I don't have photos of that, but I'm sure that you can picture that in your mind. But you get a pretty good picture of the main portion of the card here anyway. So I pop this down with that little matting layer of the Tranquil Teal, and then down onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card base. And this card does not feel complete until I have that gorgeous little birdie on. Now everything else is nice and flat here, so I am going to pop this little birdie up on a tiny little bit of foam tape. I just use the 1mm foam tape, fold it in half, and that gives me some nice dimension. Any little foam dots, foam circles, foam squares, you might have excess piece of cardstock that you'd like to pop in layers behind this. Anything is going to do the trick. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of bling, these tiny little sort of iridescent crystals or so that I'm going to pop along the branch, and you'll be able to see it much better in the final photos. A bit tricky to see, but nonetheless. And this little birdie just perched there with those gorgeous colours. As I said, I ended up replacing the sentiment, but I still really love this card, and it was a fun, pretty quick one to put together. So I hope that you have enjoyed this card today. As usual, there are links to all of the products that I've used in the description box down below. I also have a website. You should come and check it out. There are sentiments, printable sentiments. I've just launched the holiday season printable sentiments. These are free, completely free for you to download, print out, use on your projects. I have plenty of cards on my YouTube channel where I have used plenty of videos where I've used all of those printable sentiments. I also have one launching the holiday sentiments not too long ago, so you can find that over at natashafootecreative.com. Otherwise, you can find the links down in the description box below here on YouTube. Just click that little down arrow and you'll be able to see it. Anyhow, that is today's card. Thank you so much for being here, and I truly look forward to seeing you in the next one.